increased the usership up, you know, so many percentages, does that offset the other? And I didn't see that, you know, I identified in any of the proposals to justify the single stream. So, but I think basically from the Environmental Commission standpoint, it's trying to keep the recyclable materials recyclable. And I think the Commission felt that the dual stream did a better job of that.
And then my last question on that was, do you remember in the tennis proposal whether at their St. Paul Park plant, if it was fully automated, semi-automated, or manual? Because I think that determines that breakage. And that's the big piece.
Well, my recollection, it was fully automated.
It was fully automated?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Any other questions for Mr. Tripler?
Okay, Ginny's here as well. Hear from her. Thank you.
Did you want to comment, Jenny?
Thanks. Ginny Yingling, 673 Dorland Road South. I'm a member of the Environment and Natural Resources Commission. I just maybe wanted to clarify a couple of things. If you look at page 4, I think, yep, page 4 of the document, the evaluation criteria, that lists what we scored the proposals on and the scores that were allotted to it. We did not score dual versus single stream. That was not a criteria for our evaluation at any time. In fact, we had discussions on the Commission specifically that we could not rank based on those two because the proposal allowed for either one. So we couldn't say one was better than the other when we said both were allowed. So we did not score based on that. And the scoring, the revenue sharing, we never discussed that on the Commission, and certainly it never entered my mind when I was doing the ranking that that had anything to do with dual stream. I looked at, when we put it on the list of criteria for ranking because it was an incentive for us to do better, to provide a better product, to get higher money back for the city. So it was considered an incentive program that factored into how well the program operated. The reason that Eureka came out so high in their environmental and education ranking was because they had by far the most comprehensive education program provided to the residents. They could give direct feedback to a resident, and I've had this. I've had the little card in my bin saying, don't put any more of your yogurt tubs in here, they're not allowed. You can't do that with single stream because they're in a closed bin with a lid on it, and the truck rolls down the street, picks up the bin, dumps it in the trash truck, and they drive away, and they have no idea what that resident put into that bin. So there's no way to get at that residual question or that problem because there's no direct sorting at the site to say this resident needs some education on this particular item. So that's how Eureka's environmental and education score came out so high compared to some of the others. It had nothing to do with whether they were a dual stream or a single stream proposal. There was a preference of how often the collection was going to occur. And that was one place that Eureka, because they offer weekly collection, and that was something that a lot of people seemed to think was an important thing, so that there was higher participation through weekly recycling.
Mr. Lanas has a question.
Just again, with all due respect, I'm trying to get this, I'm trying to understand this. What you're saying is because the truck driver can actually get out in a dual stream situation and look at the bins, no wait.
Okay.
Because they're able to visually inspect the contents, that they can make an assessment very, very quickly and provide direct feedback to that resident, as opposed to a truck coming in and dumping in all of the commingled materials, that determined a almost 12-point swing in the way you evaluated their education piece between the 1 and the 2.
No.
And
that was one piece of their education, but their proposal was the only one because of the bins and because of how the materials are put into the truck, they're the only ones that could provide that kind of direct feedback to the individual resident. One proposal from one of the other haulers said, oh, we'll get visual inspection as the stuff is dumping into the truck. Well, that is not going to happen. The rest of the bins have lids on them, and the truck picks them up automatically and dumps them. So that was one component. But Eureka has a much broader education program that they had in their proposal than we saw. There were a couple other proposals that had good education pieces, but the commission felt that Eureka's was far and away above and beyond those proposals. So it was a combination of their environmental programs, their the variety of additional programs besides just picking up the recycling, but the additional programs that they offer, the level of education, and the fact that there can be that direct education to the individual homeowner. Those things combined are what gave them the higher score, not the fact that they were dual stream versus single stream.
Mr. Neffen?
Since you brought up bins, it made me realize there was something about this that I wasn't sure about. And this, of course, it's me, so it goes directly to price. Among all of the bids done by Tennis, they have the difference between existing city bins and then city-owned bins and Tennis-owned bins, and those are various different pricing schemes. Obviously, our existing city bins are these red things that don't have a top, the very ones that, I mean, I presume that that's what we're talking about, the ones that Eureka picks up now. So the bids that are attractive pricing-wise are the ones that involve them continuing to use the same bins. How does that work if they use the automated pickup with their trucks? Was that part of it? Can their truck pick up those?
Oh, I don't think Tennis was proposing that they would use the bins we already have. I think they were there was. Sorry, they were.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's
Well,
several.
Okay, well, if I see somebody in a Tennis T-shirt
So
in
maybe they
the
can
audience, and
answer
maybe
that.
if we have an opportunity to ask them details about this, I'll ask about that. Partly because if obviously if we had infrastructure that was incompatible with their equipment and that bid wasn't really a possibility, that would really change everything on the spreadsheet.
Yeah. If I could just add one last point, and that is, I was at a meeting recently, and someone asked me, what is going on in Maplewood? Why are you guys so far ahead of the curve on environmental stuff? What is driving that at your city? I think we're gaining a reputation in the Twin Cities of being a very environmentally conscious community. And one of the things that we always tend to do, we saw it with the wetlands ordinance, we see it with some of the other things that we're working on right now on the commission, and that is we don't want to just settle for good enough. We want to have the best. And in this instance, the highest and best use for these recycled materials isn't to just dump them in and then have maybe as much as 30% get processed and sent off to a landfill. It's to have it go to the intended use. When I put my recycling out, I expect it to be recycled. And so I think that education, we've been doing this for 5 years, we've seen great improvements on the part of the public. I think we should commit to that kind of education and continual improvement. And so that's why we felt so strongly about some of the criteria that were involved in our ranking system, was because we want to see our city continue to set the pace on what is the best way to do recycling. So those are my comments. Thanks.
So I want to make sure that Jenny's sitting down before I make any comments, because I don't want to incur the wrath, and particularly difficult then when she gives the speech about we want the best, and of course you do. Why wouldn't you? But as we were talking about the education piece, it seemed to me that Eureka has to have a strong education piece because their system requires it. We don't need a strong education piece for people just to put stuff into a bin without a lot of concern about separating it and that type of thing. There's no education needed. And so certainly Eureka has to have the best education program, because if they don't, their system won't work. And we have reached probably a plateau in recycling that we're not going to move very far above at this point, regardless how much more education we do. And so that, combined with the fact that, you know, if you indeed assume that there would be high market prices, Eureka's cost is relatively close to the others. But it won't be, particularly not in the next 3 years. I mean, recycling requires active manufacturing environment, which we don't have. And so to think that, one, we're going to recycle more, particularly in the next 3 years, I don't believe is true. And we're not going to get the highest return from a recycler for that period of time. And so that moves you down the list to at least the average market prices. And, you know, suddenly now we're talking about a 3-year difference of $220,000. And if it goes bad, you know, it could be $300,000. And so, yes, we would like to have the best recycling program in the metro area. But is it worth $75,000 a year more? I mean, when we're talking about our budget, that $100,000, that's a % on our levy. And so, you know, how much are we willing to pay to be the best? And times, in my opinion, are different now than they have been. I'm not sure that we can afford to be the best in every category. So those are concerns that I have. Kathy.
Well, first of all, what you just said about we've reached a plateau in education, it doesn't take an education to throw it all in one bin. I agree with the second part of that statement, that's for sure. But what you're basically saying then is we're going to buy into the dumbing of Maplewood, to borrow a phrase from higher up. Part of the education program on Eureka's things that we received, if anybody reads them, which is of course questionable outside of me and the Environmental Commission, is reduce, reuse, recycle. The whole education piece was not just about throwing things in a recycling bin. It was how you reduce what you use by the packaging and that type of thing. It's why they offered the linens in a separate bag and all that, to see that that stuff goes to reuse. The reduction and the reuse is part of the three-pronged thing in the recycling world. So what we have to decide is whether we're still dedicated to that or whether it has become totally a monetary question. And in my mind, with the dedication we started a lot longer ago than 5 years ago. It's just that that's when we got this contract. But this movement started in 1985, to be precise. I know I was there. It's been a long time in the coming, and educating people has been a long time in the coming. And the habits that we have now managed to form in the people who do recycle, I would believe that over half of them are doing it because they think they're doing something good for the environment. So if that isn't our goal anymore, we need to be upfront and say so. Because otherwise, it's a lie of omission to collect it, no matter how much you're collecting from how many people, knowing that a minimum of 17 to 20% of it's going in the landfill. Then we have to be honest. All we want to talk about is the money, and the actual environmental piece of recycling is not important to us anymore. Because from the beginning, if you could play back tapes from way back then, in 1987, I remember standing right there at that podium and saying, if you're doing recycling because it's a money-making proposition, you're going into the wrong business. Recycling has never been profitable and never will be. Eureka's managed to find some good markets outside of the typical 3 sometimes, and that's why they are where they are. I'm not for any particular company. If we had 3 that were competing to do the same things for us that we've always had, this would be a tougher decision. But we have a decision to make. Are we recycling environmentally, which is going to cost us more money than it did the last 5 years? It's like anything else. Or are we doing it because people got in the habit now, so we're going to do the cheaper way out because, times are tough